On the morning of Sunday, August 15th, when Justin Trudeau was on his way to Rideau Hall to call this election, there were under 2,000 COVID-19 cases in Canada. Today, there are over 5,000, more than twice as many, and the number is growing exponentially. Justin Trudeau, in the full knowledge this would happen, called an expensive, unwanted, and unnecessary election anyway. A $600 million power grab, the costliest in Canadian history. That's not leadership, it's self-interest. A prime minister who will call an election in the midst of a pandemic is not a person you can trust. I've said before that this election is a choice about Canada's future. But this election is also a choice about trust, about the character and qualities that we want to reward in Canadian society. On ne peut pas faire confiance à un Premier ministre qui déclenche une élection en pleine pandémie. J'ai déjà dit que cette élection est un choix pour l'avenir du Canada. Mais cette élection est aussi un choix pour la confiance. It's an election about whether or not we reward Justin Trudeau for breaking his promise and calling an unnecessary $600 million election in the middle of a pandemic. Friends, I got into politics for one reason. The same reason I served in the Air Force for 12 years, to serve my country. Every day in this campaign, I've stood up and talked about how we could make Canada a better place. I launched Canada's recovery plan on the first full day of this election. 164 pages in lavish detail, maybe too much detail. For 29 days, I've stood before you and announced policy after policy on everything from leadership on mental health to getting spending and inflation under control, from building 1 million new homes to giving Canadian workers a break. Today, I announced my plan to secure childcare for Canadian families, to put parents back in the driver's seat when it comes to choosing the kind of options that work best for their kids, to help lower-income families today, not 5 years from now, with up to 75% of childcare expenses covered. Aujourd'hui, j'ai annoncé mon plan pour agir pour la garde d'enfants, pour permettre aux parents de choisir les options de garde qui conviennent le mieux à leurs enfants, pour aider les familles à faible revenu aujourd'hui, pas dans 5 ans, pour les aider en supportant jusqu'à 75% des frais de garde d'enfants. But Justin Trudeau isn't interested in a serious debate about issues. The only thing that matters to him is his job. He's lunged from one wedge issue to another, dividing Canadians, blaming others for his shortfalls. Just yesterday, Justin Trudeau was at it again, refighting the battles of the past, railing against a platform and a party that no longer exists anywhere other than in his imagination. It's not 2015, Mr. Trudeau. It's 2021. And people aren't interested in the past. They care about their future. Justin, maybe you should spend more time thinking about the next 6 years rather than the last. Hier seulement, Justin Trudeau a recommencé avec les luttes du passé contre une plateforme et un parti qui n'existent que dans son imagination. On n'est pas en 2015, M. Trudeau. On est en 2021. Et les gens ne s'intéressent pas au passé. Ils pensent à l'avenir. Justin, il faudrait peut-être penser aux prochaines 6 ans au lieu des 6 derniers. For Canadians, the choice is clear. Do we reward Mr. Trudeau for calling an unnecessary $600 million election in the middle of a pandemic? Make no mistake, a vote for anyone other than Canada's Conservatives is a vote for more of the same from Mr. Trudeau. Jody Wilson-Raybould had the strength to say no to Justin Trudeau. On Monday, you can say no too. No to being taken for granted. No to more corruption. No to more borrowing. No to more lies. No to more of the same. Justin Trudeau started this election, but you can finish it. Send him a message. Say yes to a better future. Say yes to a healthier Canada. Say yes to a wealthier Canada. Say yes to Canada's recovery. Justin Trudeau a déclenché cette élection, mais vous pouvez la finir. Envoyez-lui un message. Dites oui à un meilleur avenir. Dites oui à un Canada plus riche. Dites oui au rétablissement du Canada. I love this country, and I know you do too. Our best days are on the horizon, but we desperately need unity and a way forward. So vote for Canada. Vote for a brighter future. Vote to secure the future, and vote Conservative. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
We will now be taking questions. Nous allons maintenant prendre les questions. First question.
Ian Bailey, Globe and Mail, on a different topic. Your platform promises to encourage faith-based and other community organizations to expand their provision of palliative and long-term care. Would you do that by paying them?
This is another area where Mr. Trudeau has broken his promises to provide more palliative care supports for the provinces looking to provide that as our society ages. We need to make sure that we're there for people who are suffering from illness and near the end of life. It's part of the reason why in Canada's recovery plan, we've made a $60 billion decade-long commitment to our public and universal healthcare system. Mr. Trudeau has underfunded our system, made it less prepared for future risks for an aging demographic. We will shore up our healthcare system, partner with the provinces, tackle mental health and addiction, and focus on the wellness of our economy and of our people.
But to go back to the question, would you do this by paying these groups, and why is this necessary? So I wonder if you could address those 2 points.
We will be transferring without conditions, transfers to the provinces for healthcare. In fact, beyond that, we have a $3 billion fund for infrastructure improvements to long-term care and a major investment in national mental health and fighting addiction. Those are the areas we're prioritizing. Our record amount of funds to public health care over the next decade will be without conditions, because after 6 years of Mr. Trudeau ignoring gaps in our system, picking fights with provinces, we need a Prime Minister that will work with all Canadians on the well-being of our healthcare system.
Prochaine question.
Oui, bonjour, M. O'Toole, Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Combien d'argent est-ce que vous êtes prêt à donner au Québec pour les garderies? M. Trudeau, c'est 6 milliards. Vous, c'est combien?
Comme j'ai dit, je vais coordonner avec le Premier ministre Legault et j'ai un budget dans notre plateforme chiffrée parce que je vais toujours travailler en étroite collaboration avec le Premier ministre Legault. J'ai beaucoup de respect pour le système au Québec maintenant. Depuis 20 ans, il fonctionne très bien et je vais toujours respecter ça. Avec notre plan, en plus, on va aider toutes les familles québécoises immédiatement et directement, et particulièrement pour les familles à faible revenu, on va donner plus, un montant de 75% des frais.
In English, please.
We've always said we will partner with the provinces, and we have a costed platform to make sure we can coordinate the implementation of our plan alongside a plan that has won very well in Quebec for 20 years. We will always respect provincial jurisdiction, and our plan will help all Quebec families, all Canadian families immediately. And in most parts of this country, lower income families will have all costs of childcare covered, and only our plan helps families immediately and lets parents decide what works best for their children and for their circumstances. Families need help now. 6 years of inaction by Mr. Trudeau, now he's telling families to wait another 5 or 6 years. We're going to help them now.
Je comprends que vous avez un plan. Je comprends que vous avez un plan pour aider les familles immédiatement et que ça va donner plus de flexibilité aux familles. Mais j'aimerais savoir, M. O'Toole, comment concrètement est-ce que votre plan va créer plus de places en CPE?
Parce qu'on va donner plus d'argent directement aux familles.
Et combien?
Et j'ai envoyé une lettre hier à Premier ministre Legault parce que c'est très important pour moi d'avoir une approche de respect pour le système au Québec et on va collaborer et coordonner avec le plan au Québec et notre plan. Donc, les familles au Québec vont recevoir plus
Mais combien, monsieur
avec
O'Toole?
notre plan. Plus total pour les familles à faible revenu. Et la différence entre M. Trudeau et moi, et je vais livrer pour les familles québécoises immédiatement.
In English, please.
The difference between Mr. Trudeau and myself is I will deliver. Mr. Trudeau has 6 years of broken promises, broken trust, misleading people. Jody Wilson-Raybould said no to Mr. Trudeau. It's time for Canadians to say no to someone who says whatever it takes to get elected, whatever it takes, and never delivers. I've got a track record of delivering, and for families, in the cost of living crisis we have now, they need someone who will deliver for them. Conservatives will.
Next question.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Hannah Thibodeau with CBC National News. Yesterday, you sent a letter to Quebec Premier François Legault talking about the situation with regard to childcare services is different in Quebec. That is why you say in the letter, our approach must be different with Quebec in this matter. You say you'll sit down in the first 100 days with that province. What other provinces did you send that letter to?
Well, as you know, Quebec for 20 years has had a very distinct system that has worked very well for childcare. So what we've said is we want to make sure that our plan helps Canadian families and coordinates with respect to the plan in Quebec. Our plan will be to work respectfully with all provinces on not just childcare, but on healthcare as well. I've said in the first 100 days, we'll convene a meeting to make sure we build up our public health care system. We support families. We tackle the cost of living crisis that exists in Quebec and across the country. We need a federalism of partnership for the well-being of all Canadians. We need less division, as we've seen under Mr. Trudeau. And after 6 years of no action, a few promises, hollow promises before an election, families deserve more than that.
I'm not sure you answered the question of, what other provinces in the first 100 days on childcare, but I do have another question. If you wanted to add to that into the next answer, that'd be great. You came out yesterday, sir, and were very negative against Liberal leader Justin Trudeau. It was attacking his character. This is a very tight race, as you well know. How concerned are you that some swing voters may recoil at what they could perceive as angry conservatives?
On the first full day of this campaign, we launched Canada's Recovery Plan. And for 30 days, I talked about mental health. I talked about helping families, building up our public health care system, creating 1 million jobs in 1 year, working on animal welfare, addiction, a range of issues that Canadians want a serious talk about, the future. Mr. Trudeau called a $600 million election, and every day has tried to divide people. He has no plan, no future. All he has is blaming others. And as I've said, in the final days, this is about who you trust to secure the future for our country after a very difficult health and economic crisis. I think Canadians deserve an honest government, an ethical government, and one with a plan. And Mr. Trudeau has let people down time after time after time. We deserve better than that, and so I'm asking people to choose who they trust with their future.
Next question.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Rachel Aiello, CTV News. You say your childcare plan is serious, but you've only committed to spend 1/10 of what the Liberals have proposed, with promises seemingly aimed at families who already can't afford childcare, let alone wait for a refund. How can you say your plan is comparable?
Because we're helping all families immediately. Our support goes directly to the families, not to other governments and orders of government. We will be helping families directly. And in fact, most of our Canada Recovery Plan is meant to help families who are struggling with the cost of living crisis. We're doubling the Canada Workers' Benefit. In most parts of this country, our plan will cover all the costs for childcare for families in the low income levels. And those families often work shift work. So Mr. Trudeau, after 6 years of doing nothing, is now asking those families to wait 5 years for a program that they may qualify for, but only if their work time conforms with a traditional daycare setting. That's not good enough for people on shift work, for people that are struggling to get by. We're going to help them immediately, and we're going to let families make the best decision for their family coming out of COVID-19.
And you've spoken considerably about moving away from an Ottawa knows best approach to governing, but with 6 days left in this election, you are once again running your campaign from Ottawa, where the only voters that you are coming face to face with that aren't campaign staff are few and far between. Don't you think your case would be stronger if you were out seeing firsthand the country that you want to lead?
What is great is I've spoken to more Canadians directly about their hopes, fears, and challenges for the way forward. Just last night, I spoke to a father who's worried about 3 of his children in their 20s never being able to afford a home. I heard similar comments a few weeks ago in our telephone town hall with a mother from Burlington. Mr. Trudeau is giving up on a generation of people owning their own home. We've got a plan to actually tackle the housing crisis, ban foreign money, and actually really help people. Canadian families deserve a break. Mr. Trudeau's out of control spending is leading to inflation. We need to help families, and we've been talking to folks in person through our town halls. We're here to serve the country, and I'd ask people, secure your future with a vote for the Conservatives.
Next question.
Mr. O'Toole, Michael Conservative Global National. One of the key critiques of the Tory approach on childcare is that it doesn't adequately address accessibility. It creates no new spaces, especially in these so-called childcare desert parts of the countries that don't have enough access to childcare spots. Why doesn't your plan create more spots?
Our plan will help all families immediately and will create places and will give families the flexibility to come up with what works for them best immediately. And as I've said, in most parts of the country, lower income families will have all of their costs covered. We have to be there for all families right away. We can't, after 6 years of inaction by Mr. Trudeau, leave families hanging for another 5 years. They need our help now, and we're going to give parents the flexibility. All families will be better off immediately under our plan.
Just as a follow-up, I know you like to criticize it, but the Liberals' childcare plan already has buy-in from 8 provinces and is something that many economists have touted as important for Canada's economic recovery, given the impact on the pandemic on working parents. They even say it'll boost the GDP. So why waste that momentum and not continue on with their 8 deals, and why disregard the potential impact on a COVID recovery?
The Conservatives want to help all families. Mr. Trudeau's provided no help for 6 years, and now is making people wait another 5 and only helping some families. We're going to help all families immediately and let parents make the decision. Folks in the lower income will not only have most of their childcare costs covered, we're giving them a raise, a $1 per hour raise by doubling the Canada Workers' Benefit. Only Canada's Conservatives have a plan to actually help people who are struggling with the cost of living crisis that Mr. Trudeau is making worse.
Next question.
Chris Reynolds, Canadian Press. In a Twitter post in French last night, you said you would close the informal border crossing at Roxham Road in upstate New York, a road by which tens of thousands of asylum seekers have entered Quebec and Canada since 2017. And you also talk in your platform about ending the practice of the RCMP and the Canada Border Services Agency acting as unofficial welcoming committees assisting with illegal crossings, is the quote. How will you close a border crossing where Canada has already stopped allowing asylum seekers, which is also the case at other unauthorized points of entry?
It is completely unfair for people to cross the border in a way that's illegal and claim asylum outside the normal process. We have a very generous system. We want to keep it that way, but make sure people follow the rules and that we focus in terms of asylum support for people that are fleeing persecution. So the Safe Third Country Agreement, our approach with the United States, needs to apply to all parts of the border. We have thousands of families waiting for family reunification, backlogs that were bad before COVID-19. It is completely unfair to them to watch 60,000 people not adhere to the rules at Roxham and other sites in our border. It's just another example of Mr. Trudeau not having a fair and serious approach with respect to the border. C'est totalement injuste de voir 60 000 personnes qui ont traversé la frontière dans une manière illégale, particulièrement avec des milliers de familles qui sont en train d'attendre pour leur famille avec la réunification familiale. C'est pourquoi on doit avoir une approche sérieuse à chemin Roxham et imposer l'attente avec les Américains sur la frontière. On doit régler la situation. Et comme d'habitude, M. Trudeau était là et il n'a pas une approche sérieuse avec la frontière et nos réfugiés.
Your election platform doesn't actually specify how many immigrants Canada would let into the country under your government. Are you going to maintain the Liberals' goal of bringing in about 400,000 immigrants per year, or will you accept a smaller number of immigrants?
Let me be very clear. Canada needs rising immigration to have an economic recovery, to secure our future. And we're going to make sure we fix the backlogs in family reunification. We need to speed up to allow people to be reunited. We need to speed up the process for credential recognition for people that come that want to have their careers here. We need increasing immigration to grow this country, and we're going to make sure that we see that both for family reunification, for skills to match with the needs of our economy, and we're going to try very hard to recognize credentials by the time that people arrive in Canada. On a besoin plus d'immigrants pour notre avenir. C'est très important pour notre économie et on doit régler la situation avec la réunification familiale. On va régler la situation avec les travailleurs étrangers. C'est pourquoi pour le Québec, je vais donner plus d'autonomie en immigration pour le Québec parce qu'il y a une pénurie de main-d'œuvre là-bas. On doit avoir plus d'immigrants et on va cibler sur ça.
Next question.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Chris Selly from the National Post. I want to come at this childcare from a slightly different angle. I mean, you talk about these no strings attached transfers to the provinces on health care. That seems to be basically what you're offering Mr. Legault on childcare, but not the other provinces. And as my colleague pointed out, you know, a lot of these provinces seem to quite like the Liberal approach, albeit quite recent. So I'm just wondering, is the door open to other provinces to sit down with you and say, listen, we would like to use the money that you're offering on childcare in a different way than just this tax credit?
I've said we're going to have a federalism of partnership. After many years of division and inaction and neglect, quite frankly, from Mr. Trudeau, we have a national unity crisis after 6 years of Mr. Trudeau, something that didn't exist 6 years ago. Our country is fractured because Mr. Trudeau always puts his own interests first. So I will work closely with all provinces on federal transfers for everything from health to education to the well-being of our country. That will be my approach in the first 100 days as Prime Minister, bring the country together. For Quebec, with respect to their system on daycare, they've had a 20-year system that has worked very well and is very unique within our federation. So I've said we will coordinate with the Premier to make sure that our plan adds to the situation for families in Quebec and we can have a fair approach. Oh, on doit travailler ensemble. Après 6 ans de M. Trudeau, on a plus de divisions partout au pays. Et on a besoin d'un rassembleur comme Premier ministre. Et dans mes premiers 100 jours comme Premier ministre, je vais avoir des réunions avec le Premier ministre sur la santé, parce que je vais faire des investissements historiques, mais aussi pour la garderie, l'éducation, tous les enjeux importants pour les familles canadiennes, familles québécoises. Je vais être là comme un partenaire avec un fédéralisme de partenariat. C'est dans mon contrat avec les Québécoises et les Québécois.
On a different question, you have these press conferences every morning and you're often accompanied, as you are today, by some of your local candidates, but you often, as today, don't even mention their names, you don't give them a shout out. I'm just wondering what people should take from that. Do you want people to basically see this election as a referendum between a stark choice between you and Mr. Trudeau?
Canadians deserve better than another 4 years of Justin Trudeau. He's called an election in a pandemic, something that's going to cost our country $600 million. We could build several hospitals for the cost of Mr. Trudeau's hubris. So yes, I do believe people need to choose better, need a leader they can trust. I am very proud of our candidates. In fact, Susan McArthur, who is our candidate here, is with us, has tremendous business experience, someone that will help us get our economic recovery plan back on board. We have Heidi, Jennifer, Mary Elise, and Matt, all of whom are running on Canada's recovery plan, all of whom are committed community volunteers and passionate Canadians that know our country's best days are ahead of us, but we need unity, we need a plan, and we deserve better than a Prime Minister always putting himself first.
Prochaine question.
Oui, bonjour, M. O'Toole, Julien Paquette avec le Journal La Droite. Pour des enjeux un peu plus locaux, j'aimerais avoir votre position, la position de votre parti concernant les grands enjeux d'infrastructure pour des enjeux d'infrastructure fédérale ici à Ottawa et dans les environs. La question de la reconstruction du pont Alexandra, est-ce que vous souhaitez qu'on le démolisse et qu'on le reconstruise ou vous souhaitez qu'on le modernise finalement, qu'on préserve la structure actuelle?
Merci pour la question. Je vais avoir une approche de partenariat avec les autres paliers de gouvernement, les municipalités incluant ici et les provinces aussi, particulièrement sur les infrastructures très importantes pour les économies locales. Et le pont Alexandria est un exemple de ça. Donc, je vais être là pour participer dans les décisions en ce qui concerne l'infrastructure ici et de nation à l'autre. We will try and bring an approach of partnership with all levels of government, municipal, provincial, and the federal government, on issues of importance to the infrastructure and the local economy, like the Alexandra Bridge here. We need to be a partner. That will be an example of the federalism of partnership that we want to bring on all levels, especially on funding of infrastructure, and we need to get funding out the door, not just announce it, we need shovels in ground.
Et aussi dans le lien des transports, le transport en commun, il y a deux grands projets qui sont en attente un peu dans la région. Il y a le tramway du côté de l'ouest de Gatineau qui va traverser au centre-ville d'Ottawa et la troisième phase, la troisième étape du train léger à Ottawa. Est-ce que votre parti s'engage à soutenir ces deux projets-là?
Oui, dans notre plan pour le rétablissement du Canada, on a fait des annonces sur le transport en commun dans la grande région d'Ottawa, aussi sur les chemins de fer et le transport entre Québec et Toronto avec le train de grande fréquence. On doit avoir des investissements pour notre économie et pour le transport en commun. We have announced in Canada's recovery plan historic investments in infrastructure in both the Ottawa area and in terms of high-frequency rail between Quebec City and Toronto-Windsor, that corridor. The biggest thing we need to do is to see these investments not just announced, as Mr. Trudeau does. We need shovels in ground. We need to really build our country and our economy back up after COVID.
This will be the last question. Ce sera la dernière question.
Hi, Taylor Blewett, Ottawa Citizen. Speaking of infrastructure, we've seen the Conservatives commit to immediately prioritizing the construction of the Canada LRT extension. Will you make the same commitment to the Barrhaven LRT extension, which is also part of the third phase of LRT planned for Ottawa?
As you said, we've made a commitment already for the Canada LRT, and we're there to be a partner with Council, Mayor Watson, and local levels of government. This will be our approach in a federalism of partnership. On infrastructure, we need to partner on the priorities of the provinces and municipalities, and then the federal government has to step up with money and accelerate these economic investments, and as much as possible, also try to tie housing and density to this. That's in our plan to both secure more housing, 1 million homes in the next 3 years, and to get shovels in ground. After Mr. Trudeau sometimes announces things multiple times, but never achieves them. That's what we need in a Prime Minister, somebody who actually delivers, and we will deliver.
I'm not sure I heard a commitment to Barrhaven specifically, so I guess residents in that area will be left wondering if a Conservative government would support that project. But you say this election is about character. We've seen Liberal candidates surface a Facebook post shared in the past by your candidate in Pontiac involving a racist joke targeting the Chinese community. Have you spoken with your candidate, Michel Gauthier, about this? And what, if any, steps will you take to send a message that this isn't acceptable?
We are running a plan in a campaign to secure our economic future, to tackle the issues our country is facing coming out of COVID-19. Every single candidate is running on Canada's recovery plan and a commitment to tackle inequalities, tackle the issues coming out of COVID-19, which are dividing Canadians. That is my expectation for every single candidate. A positive vision for the future, an ethical team with a plan to get our country back on track.
It will be all for
Mr. O'Toole, you'll take another question?
Merci. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.